This is Beyond the Box Score, advanced stats from simple people. We welcome you to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Adam Azer, Jacob Gibbs, and Dan Schneier. Hey, Jacob and Dan, the Detroit Lions did something that no team has done since 2012. What did they do?
Throw 5 interceptions and win a game?
Yeah!
Let's go.
And, of course, you remember the last time it happened, Dan. It was, of course, go ahead.
I don't remember the last time it happened, but I think it was the Rams game with Goff with the Rams.
No. Don't remember. No, I'm just.
Oh, was it Eli Monday Night Football against the Vikings when they had like Josh Freeman?
Nah, you would not remember. It was the Falcons in 2012. I was just setting you up for failure.
Of course, I'm not gonna remember a random Falcons game from 2012.
Yeah, Jacob, you are muted. Were you trying to say anything, or because I saw your mouth move? Okay, that's fine. Hey, Jacob, what's going on? Nice Chiefs jacket there.
Thank you. 9-0, baby. Another well-deserved win. Thanks, refs. Thanks, everybody. Fun season.
Who's second in the MVP race for you guys?
Baker Mayfield. I don't
Whoa.
know. I'm just
Josh Allen.
Very difficult question because it was Jared Goff, but I don't know if I can.
So Lamar's 1. Josh Allen would be 2 for me.
Is
Easy.
he really having that good of a year, Josh Allen?
Yes, considering his situation, yes. I mean, I watch him make plays every week that go above and beyond. For me, MVP is trying to sort out the individual performance of the quarterback versus their, I guess you would call it like
quarterback. Why does it have to be the quarterback? Why can't it be Jameson? Why can't
it will never, for me, not be the quarterback. I've watched too much tape in the NFL to understand that the quarterback makes the most difference by such a wide margin that some fans don't even really understand it and are unwilling to acknowledge it. But when you consider the ball placement, the timing of the offense, and all of those factors, as a fan of the Giants, I understand this more than anyone else. The quarterback makes the biggest difference in your wins and losses by such a margin.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it's a tough question. Let's just give it to Lamar Jackson 3 times.
It is. Yeah. I mean, Lamar's the obvious pick.
Let's talk about last night's game, Detroit 26, Houston 23. Before we dive into that, I'll preview what's ahead. We have, of course, our advanced stats from Jacob. We'll give you some news updates. Not a lot, thankfully. We will talk about the Jets' struggles. We'll talk about Brian Thomas Jr. We'll talk about the tight end position, and we'll talk about schedules. I've broken down the best schedules for quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, and talk about who you might want to target going forward, or if it even matters, because this year I don't know that it does. I mean, schedules matter, matchups absolutely matter, but to me, there's so few bad matchups out there. I just like, unless a team is playing maybe the Eagles right now, maybe the Chiefs, Ravens run defense, something like that.
I think there are other bad matchups, right? Like the Chargers, for example, is a really bad matchup for offenses because because the Chargers are at, I think they're allowing the fewest points per game on defense. And in addition to that, on offense, they control the clock and grind the clock. That's the biggest thing that kills me for when I'm having fantasy players. So I'm looking for stuff like that. Even like Chicago, for example, their defense has fallen off a bit, but they're very grindy on offense too. And then you go to Chicago, for example, playing that wind and you can't throw the football through that wind. So I'm looking for weather and I'm looking for kind of the opposite, like offenses that grind the ball out and provide fewer snaps and possessions for the opposing offense.
Yeah, no, I don't think I say about the Chargers. Their next 2 games are against Cincinnati, Baltimore, then Atlanta. So we'll find out a little bit more about them. They've had such an easy schedule. But anyway, let's continue here. Let's talk about Sunday Night Football. What a comeback. What a win. And what an awesome halftime interview with Dan Campbell. He's like, we just need to get a turnover. And then they immediately get a turnover on the first play. And Jacob, what are your thoughts on the Lions comeback win over Houston?
I'm excited to watch it. I've been told I only need to watch the second half. I, full disclosure, was not feeling great this weekend. Also traveled, so the only game I watched was the Chiefs, but I'm catching up on everything. Some interesting notes that I've found so far in this game is that Stroud just continues to really struggle with pressure, and that's just been a huge problem because their line is up there. It's like obviously probably got to be the Bears is the worst offensive line in the NFL, but I feel like Houston's is up there with anybody.
Yeah.
He had a 34% off target rate when pressured in week 10, and that just continues to be a problem for him. They are just really trying to run the offense through the ground game, especially with Nico Collins out, and it's not pretty. I am not looking forward to watching a bunch of 2-yard runs in this game.
Yeah, there was a lot of that, but it was an exciting game. So yeah, Jacob was actually not going to do the show today because he hasn't been feeling well, but we do appreciate him hanging out. And, and even though he hasn't watched a ton of football, he still can give us the metrics that we need to know. All right, Dan, how about you? Any big takeaways from this one?
Yeah, biggest takeaway is the Houston Texans offense as we move forward. Jacob hinted at some of the concerns, namely being the offensive line and the current state of the Texans offensive line as they deal with more injuries. I also think there is some, at least a little hint of what we see a lot in the NFL, which is quarterback and offensive scheme look unbelievable in year one. In year two, defensive coordinators get a lot more tape on it. All they need, they say, is 8 to 10 games. They take away some of the concepts that were working. And is there a counterpunch? Right now, there is no counterpunch. I saw a stat today. The Giants are the obvious one, but the Texans are second, or the Giants and Texans are first in the NFL in most third down snaps on offense this year. What does that tell you? That tells you that they're not getting themselves first downs on first and second down. They're leaving themselves in a lot of these third and long situations, and their offense has been really unsuccessful in the run game. Last night, Joe Mixon, I think it was 25 carries, became one of the, I forgot this stat, but like one of the first players to ever get under 50 yards with 25 carries or more in a game. They can't run block. They can't keep the offense on script at all right now. I hope it'll change when Nico Collins is back. He's that good of a talent and that good of a receiver, and he opens up that much space in the offense that it's possible. But right now, this does not look like an offense that's going to win fantasy leagues. It looks like an offense at times you can even bench.
Wow. Okay. Let's just calm down a little bit here. Let me just lay it out for you. Here's the deal. Joe Mixon is an absolute must-start running back. He had 5 straight 100 yards before struggling last night, and he still scored 17 points last night. But he does have the toughest playoff schedule. He has Kansas City and Baltimore, 2 hardest run defenses in football in weeks 16 and 17. So you do need to factor that in. If you can trade him for equal value, I think it's a good idea. But he still, Detroit, good run defense. And because he had 44 receiving yards, he had a rushing touchdown. He came through, but just keep that in mind. CJ Stroud goes into that once Nico Collins comes back, he goes into that big group of quarterbacks that are basically the same, but you just, depending on the matchup, you change your rankings. Is he a must start? Absolutely not. Is he someone I'm dropping? No.
That's what I was saying. Play him in the matchups.
Yeah, play the matchups. Nico Collins could be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy going forward. It wouldn't surprise anyone. Tank Dell is a number 2/number 3 wide receiver going forward. And that's it. Everything you said about the Texans is true, but they still have so much talent that you're starting Nico, you're starting Mixon and Tank Dell in a 3-receiver league. I have him in 2 leagues where it's either 3 receivers or it's 2 flex. I'm starting him pretty much every week. You know what I mean? It's like you just can't get away from it.
I might get away from some of these matchups with Tank Dell for sure.
Yeah, maybe with Tank Dell. He was wide open. He was open in the end zone for what could have been a nice.
And I'm not sold that CJ Stroud is even in that group of quarterbacks.
I think he is. I think if you look at his first 4 games, he scored 22.7 points against the Colts. He scored 27.5 against the Jaguars. And in the middle, he had 2 bad games against the Bears and the Vikings. So that's kind of matchup dependent there. And those were the 4 games he played with Nico. And then Nico got hurt in week 5. But of course, he had Diggs in that stretch. So that's, yeah, I think if we're going to disagree on one thing, it could be Stroud.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to drop him because he gets, if you care about this, he gets Baltimore in week 17. He gets Miami, who currently they're 3rd against quarterbacks, but they're paper tigers in week 15. He gets Jacksonville. He gets Dallas next week. He's got a really good schedule for the most part coming up. Now
one take on the flip side of this. Oh yeah, sorry. Were you going to get into Lions?
Hey, let's talk about the Lions here. Right? They're just so. They're another team. It's like you have to deal with some ups and downs. Jahmyr Gibbs, 2 straight games with fewer than 15 PPR fantasy points. That's not what we expected from him. But overall, he's the number 5 running back per game in non-PPR. He's the number 8 running back per game in full PPR. He's only on pace for 42 catches. Montgomery, he scored a touchdown. He's been pretty inefficient running the football lately, but he scores all the time. And for the season, he's number 13 in non-PPR, number 18 per game in full PPR. Goff, just a weird game. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's like, yeah, what are your thoughts? And by the way, the Sam Laporta injury could be interesting here, could change these a little bit. He's got a shoulder injury. But Dan, what are your thoughts on the Lions?
I think the biggest takeaway I had was Jameson Williams, I mean, he looked so damn good in this game. From the catch that he made that was behind him from Goff, that he zipped in there, that he adjusted to behind him, making plays like that people didn't really give him credit for, but you saw on his tape at Alabama that he had that upside to be a complete wide receiver. The hits he takes over the middle, he's now become an intermediate threat in this offense, in addition to being a vertical threat. And I think that moving forward, Jameson Williams is not somebody I would want out of my lineups. This is the best offense in the NFL from a scoring standpoint. You're getting a player who is running a lot of routes in this offense, is now using the intermediate level, has the talent to make catches and big plays in the intermediate level, in addition to what he didn't do this week, but can do at any time, the deep half. And Goff did throw him a ball in the deep half. I believe it was intercepted, at least one that I remember. So Jameson Williams to me has become a must start moving forward.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes. Wide receiver 3.
What are you talking about, dude?
Stand by it.
It's just not enough targets. There's just not enough
targets.
Look, if Laporta's out, that could change things, but
that's part of the issue here.
Yeah, but they almost lost this game, and Jared Goff threw 30 passes. That's like one of the highest marks of the year for Jared Goff.
Jacob, support me on this one. You're high on Jameson as well, correct?
I'm a bit concerned by the lower volume overall for the receivers.
I'm out, man. This is just a bad take. If I don't even have Jacob, I got nothing.
I do love the way they're using him.
I'm talking about like a wide receiver 3 flex. Like you're looking at guys in addition.
Oh,
like
you can't
the players you're playing in
that.
That's what I mean by that must start. Like a wide receiver 3 flex. Like the players you're playing in that position, they may have some volume on a week basis, but then they don't have volume the next week. We're talking about somebody in one of the better offenses in the NFL.
Yeah,
the best offense in the NFL with explosive play potential. To me, this is an easy.
I think I get the sentiment. It's kind of what we've been dealing with Xavier Worthy, except he sucks and isn't doing anything. But it's like the upside is so big each week that unless you have stacked receivers and you don't need to start him, if it's like it's kind of a toss up where it's like wide receiver 20 to 30 and you've got other guys, you don't want to miss out on that potential 20 or 30 points with Jameson Williams. It could come at any time because the offense is so good and because he's so good and the usage is good. I love the way they use him over the middle, like you're talking about, to get yak in addition to the deep stuff. And so like that, it's not like must start necessarily in the way that we think of with some of the top players.
But take in the chat, and I respect it. It was not a good take. It was presented in a poor way. But the way I look at fantasy is for these flex wide receiver 3 decisions. Again, I'm willing to take the boom bust.
I agree with that
over some of these supposed target guys that don't actually get targets on a weekly basis.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But he does not get targets on a weekly basis. He gets
but he can make big plays.
And now comparing him to Tank Dell, which Rob is doing here, is very interesting. I would probably take Jameson Williams over Tank Dell.
Yeah.
With
yeah, exactly. Yeah, way more faith in the offense. Jameson Williams had 140 air yards in week 10. The Lions offense over the 2 previous weeks with him out had 149 total air yards. So it definitely adds a completely different element to the offense to have him back.
All right. Well, that is Lions and Texans.
I've got something for the chat too. They're saying like what Jacob doesn't watch games. Remember what Jacob said last year? He doesn't watch games, doesn't like watching games. No, I said last year that I don't watch every single game because that would be insane. I don't watch the Giants every single week. I don't watch the Patriots when they're starting Jacoby Brissett, all that stuff. I have a life. That's why I didn't watch all the games this weekend. Is my sister was in town from Texas. I haven't seen her in a long time. I'm going to catch up on all the games. If you watch my Twitter feed, just constantly littered with videos of film.
Yeah, it's true.
He's not a robot, guys. I know sometimes he may sound a little bit robotic, but he's not a robot.
I don't know. What does he sound like? What does Jacob sound like?
Protect Jacob at all costs.
It pisses me off. People are like, all he does is, he's just stats. He's just stats. And it's like, no, just because I love stats and I have better stats than the other people doesn't mean that I don't watch the games. Watch tons of games.
Version of Jacob.
This is the angriest I've ever seen Jacob. He has smiled the entire time and has basically not raised his voice. Yeah. Meanwhile, if you saw me on the live stream yesterday during the Giants game, like I was flipping out. So this.
Oh, I wish I'd see. I got to go back and watch that. Actually, in the chat, somebody said they would pay to see us dual watch a Giants game, but I don't think people are going to get what they pay for if they do that because I'm now apathetic toward the Giants, and I have been apathetic for quite some time. So I wouldn't have been going off on the Giants in during that game. I just sit there, kind of quietly and disgusted watching the quarterback play some of the worst football I've ever seen from a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. All right, beyond the box score, who's coming up this week, guys?
This week we got Jamie Eisenberg, another classic FFT guy. So when we went through the list, we had a bunch of FFT guys on this that we want to get on the show, and everyone was really receptive and open to it. Everyone was interested. People are excited about it. Heath was excited. Dave was excited. Jamie was excited. And then we got to Adam, and he's like, do I really have to do this? I really don't want to do this. And so finally we kind of bullied Adam into being on the show. So eventually Adam will be on the show.
I don't remember that, but did I agree? Maybe I did agree. These are some funny Jacob Gibbs comments in the chat. We're going to get to them in a moment. We'll be right back after this break on Fantasy Football Today.
Baby, we are gonna start a fire.
From world-renowned clubs
simply devastating
to worldwide stars,
Wrexham have done it. This incredible ride continues.
The English Football League on CBS Sports Network, and stream every match live on Paramount Plus.
Jacob may be the love child of JJ Jacariason and Chris Harris.
I can kind of see that.
Well, Harris watches the film, and JJ's more of a stat guy.
Yeah.
Jacob looks like a member of Average Joe's from Dodgeball. Like, the color scheme.
Nicolas Cage is really probably the funniest of all the commenters on a consistent basis, I would say.
Who is Nicolas Cage? He's good. He's good.
I think I loved. Is that the Rob Lowe with the NFL hat? Is his avatar? I really like that too.
Oh, yeah. Jacob is just salty because the Chiefs got exposed by the Broncos.
Wow.
LOL.
No. Hilarious.
It's crazy because every single week that I watch the Chiefs, I get frustrated with Andy Reid's conservatism in the red zone and overall, and it never matters because they win every game. It's so crazy. It hasn't come back to bite him yet.
Yeah. All right. News and notes. So Joe Flacco is going to stay the quarterback. I'm going to just repeat what I said yesterday. Carolina did not commit to a quarterback coming out of the bye. Tank Bigsby's beat up. Aaron Jones has injured ribs. Those are the ones we're keeping an eye on. The tight end, Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid are injured right now. And they get Jacksonville and Kansas City. Laporta gets Jacksonville. And I didn't mention that about the Lions. Their next two games are Jacksonville and Indianapolis. So bonanza. And Dalton Kincaid gets the Chiefs next week, then a bye. Offensive line. The Jets' offensive line is struggling. Tyron Smith is struggling, and he left with a neck injury. Saints left tackle Talise Fuaga, rookie left tackle, left with a thigh injury. Colts left tackle Bernard Raymond, who's missed some time. He missed a game with a concussion. He left with a knee injury. I think, I could be wrong about this. I think when Tevin Jenkins left with an ankle injury, the Bears may have been down all five of their original starters on the offensive line.
I think that's true as well. It's unbelievable what's happened there.
Yeah, so you just can't win like that. And Tristan Wirfs for the Buccaneers, he's going to miss maybe a couple weeks. They have a bye. He has a MCL injury. I think they avoided a bad scenario there, but they basically have 3 or 4 straight buys. The Buccaneers have the bye week, then the Giants, Panthers, and Raiders. So they are in good shape. Other news, anything big here? Yeah, there's Micah Parsons called out Mike McCarthy. Did you see Micah Parsons' quotes about Mike?
Yeah, that was a crazy quote by Parsons.
Let me see if I can get it so I don't, misquote.
I listened to the whole interview too, because I think Jordan Revere or somebody posted the entire interview. The entire quote, it wasn't as bad, but it kind of still was, because he ends it by saying, Zach Martin put in more time and work than Mike McCarthy ever could have or ever has, or something like that.
Mike can leave and go wherever he wants. Guys I kind of feel bad for, guys like Zach Martin, guys who might be on their last year or on their way out, because that's who I wanted to hold the trophy for. You want to win games and do great things with those types of legends who put in more time and work than Mike McCarthy ever did. Those are the kinds of guys that I have so much sympathy and hurt for.
It's also kind of funny because it's like, no, actually, Mike McCarthy can't just leave and go wherever he wants to. This is literally his last chance at a head coaching job, and he will never be an offensive coordinator in the NFL. No one can. And his whole style is so stupid. It's just the same 11 personnel, win your one-on-one matchups. It's not really like any scheme involved in it, and it's been figured out completely almost as it was in Green Bay with his first firing. So I don't know. I don't really understand that quote.
Yeah, well, pretty bad day for the Cowboys. And really, Jerry Jones, just own your mistake and put the curtains.
Put the curtain up with the sun.
Do it already. It's like, well, why don't we just tear down the whole stadium and build a new one? No, just put the curtains up. It's not that big of a deal. All right, let's get to some advanced metrics in just a moment. But right now, if you haven't signed up yet for BetMGM, use the bonus code FANTASY, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. Now, look, you've seen me. If I can do it, you can do it. I downloaded the app. I used the bonus code FANTASY. It was great. You can do it. Download BetMGM. By the way, I hope you guys got my just a moment, right? Corporate Nina speaking.
Office Space.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Come on. It should have been.
I should have hit that one. Yeah, that's one of the rare movies I've seen.
All right, Jacob, what do we got in the advanced metrics world?
A couple things on Detroit that I wanted to mention, but I was too busy berating the chat. Jameson Williams is over 2 yards per out run on the year, which shocked me when I saw it today. I've just been kind of like catching up on where everybody's at with the most recent data. Like we got Jauan Jennings back. Where's he at after another week? George Pickens, where's he at? 6th overall, by the way, for George Pickens in yards per out run on the year. But yeah, Jameson Williams is 20th among wide receivers, 2.06 yards per out run. That's a really good indicator. I think I'm leaning more and more towards Dan. He's just a really explosive player and a really, really explosive offense. And especially if Laporta goes down, I do think those two have affected each other this year. The other one was Jahmyr Gibbs had a 61% share of the running back rushes this week, which is his second highest mark of the year. And so that is good. Last week, his usage came down a bit because I think it was mostly game script dependent. They're in an easy game that they're winning, but I think they've really kind of shifted towards Gibbs if all things are equal, because he's just been so freaking good this year.
I think Gibbs hurt his ankle in the game 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah, right.
And that's why but no, because it wasn't really spoken about. I just saw it on.
I do feel like they've moved more toward Gibbs as well, though.
Yeah. I have some more stats about that. If you like, David Montgomery in his first 5 games, he was on pace for 255 carries. In his last 4 games, he's on pace for only 200 carries. So that's David Montgomery. And I forgot to look at the carries for Gibbs, but they haven't changed their run rate. They have an even higher run rate in the last 4 games than the first 5, but Montgomery is getting fewer carries. All right, go ahead, Jacob. Sorry.
Okay, and I did want to talk about George Pickens for a while because he's just been insanely unlucky this year. Scott Barrett has done a really good job documenting it, like penalties, plays called back, touchdowns called back, all this stuff. And even with all of the like big chunk plays called back, he's still 6th in yards per out run, which is crazy. He's averaging 2.6 yards per out run of the year. With Russell Wilson under center, it's at 3.2, which only trails Nico Collins and AJ Brown. It's above Justin Jefferson. And part of that is he's weird where it's like not quite a full-time player. You know what I'm saying? Like they maximize the routes that he's actually out there. He's getting thrown to a lot. They don't have him run a lot of empty routes. I don't know if you've noticed that, but like most receiver ones play like 80-90% of the snaps. He doesn't. But still, like he's been really, really good on the year. He's top 5 in red zone and end zone target share. And I think the rest of season schedule sets up for the Steelers to be passing the ball a ton and probably avoiding the run against the Ravens and Chiefs and people like that. And I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Pickens is like top 8, you could push him. He could lead the receivers in fantasy points from this point on, and it wouldn't surprise me at all.
So the only thing I'd say about George Pickens' schedule is that it looks, now look, I ask you, do you think Cleveland is a tough matchup? And a lot of people would probably say yes. They're giving up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. They've been a cake matchup so far. Do they fix things during their bye? I don't know. But so far, like if you look at his upcoming schedule, George Pickens has the Ravens, the Browns twice. Like I just said, they're giving up the 5th most fantasy points, and the Bengals, who are 20th against wide receivers. So that's great. After that, though, his playoff schedule is the Eagles, who have been absolutely phenomenal 5 weeks in a row. They are the best defense in football over the last 5 weeks. And they faced like alpha number ones. Lamb, of course, with Cooper Rush. But other than that, like neighbors, Jamar Chase, Amari Cooper with the Browns, I wouldn't call him that. But there was one other guy. And they've done great. And Kansas City in week 17. They played Baltimore in week 16. That's great. Kansas City in week 17. So 2 of his 3 matchups are the Eagles and the Chiefs. Does that concern you at all for George Pickens in the playoffs?
To me, George Pickens is sort of a matchup independent guy, and it's more important that there's going to be pass volume. I think he can kind of win just about any matchup. Like physically, he's such a freak that like he can just go get the ball. Obviously, like the pressure from the Chiefs scares me a little bit, and like Pittsburgh's offense might just like hole in against either one of those teams and only put up 10 points. But if they're playing well and like in a shootout, I'm more encouraged by the fact that there's going to be passing, I think, in those games as they're playing from behind. And so if we see 9-10 targets, there's a pretty good chance he comes down with a big play on at least one of them. On the note about Cleveland, I think those two matchups are actually great for him. They are really susceptible to big plays because they're really, really aggressive. They blitz a lot. They play a ton of man and press coverage, and that's great for Pickens. Pickens is one of the absolute best producers against press coverage in the NFL. Last year against Cleveland, he went for 127-1, and then the other game he didn't do as much, but that was a game that Kenny Pickett had 106 yards. So I actually do think that's a good matchup for him.
Okay, so we've talked about Detroit. We've talked about George Pickens. What's next?
Jauan Jennings. Jauan Jennings is so awesome. He's wide receiver 4 in yards per out run on the year, behind only Nico, A.J. Brown, and Justin Jefferson. Wide receivers.
Now he's a definite must start. We can all agree on that, correct?
No.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
That's the easiest yes we've ever seen. This is one of the better offenses, and he's the first read.
Hold on. We have very different definitions of must start.
Okay. I had him at wide receiver 16 this week, and I think that's basically where he's at. Is a top 15 wide receiver. That's basically
must press into the top 12 in any given matchup.
Listen, to call a guy a must start when he has Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle on the field with him.
Come on, we said this about Ayuk forever, and Ayuk was a must start.
He's not Brandon Ayuk. Let him go out there and be Brandon Ayuk before we call him Brandon Ayuk. And like, I don't know. Like, I'm thrilled. It doesn't really matter because I'm thrilled to have Jauan Jennings, right? And I'm in a 3-receiver league. I can't imagine I'm sitting him. For people playing in 2-receiver leagues with a flex, I don't know that Jauan Jennings is a must start. He's like, I don't know how many. Because to me, there are not that many must starts. I don't even know if there are
in leagues that only start 2 receivers anymore.
Many more people than play in 3-receiver leagues. The majority of people play in 2-receiver.
I don't agree with that, but
it's not an opinion. It's an absolute fact. I know from our CBS
data. Very Azer stats.
No.
We'll let it ride. We'll let it ride.
Our CBS data, like just CBS websites, most of them are 2-receiver leagues. CBS website leagues, most of them are 2-receiver leagues.
Okay.
Jauan Jennings is not a guy you just set it and forget it. You don't even think about it.
I do think he is the rest of the season, especially because they're another team that's going to be in a lot of shootouts potentially. They've got the Seahawks, then the Packers, then the Bills. Yes. Maybe not against the Bears, but then they have the Rams, Dolphins, and Lions. Like basically every game has shootout upside.
I think it just depends on what your definition of must start is. Wide receiver is pretty rough this year.
From yesterday, though, like what Jacob just went over with those advanced stats, that was essentially one of the better wide receiver roles in the entire league this week, correct? On the slate?
Yeah, he led the team in everything receiving, including routes. He ran a route on every dropback but one. He was playing on the perimeter more than in the slot. Right. I think he's basically just plugged into the Ayuk role, which might be volatile. But I think when they're playing in games where they're going to be throwing a lot, then I think I don't know. Like, I think he's going to be pretty consistent, honestly.
Me too.
I hope so. Okay, go on.
All right. I don't know, honestly, what else I had beyond that.
Great take from Rob Cho. Like, top wide receivers are basically considered must start in most leagues, regardless of format. Maybe not this year due to RB strength, but historically, so agreed. Adam, like Rob's right. Like when I say must start, I'm thinking that you need to start 30 receivers. Like, what are we talking about? There's only like 20 receivers starting a week. Okay. What league is that?
So why are we even here? If you're telling me that 30 wide receivers must start, then what are we doing here? Okay, are we telling you what to do with Alec Pierce every week?
He's not in the top 30. What are you talking about? There's 32 teams, dude.
I know. I'm saying we don't even have to talk about the top 30 wide receivers because they're just must starts. Throw them in your lineup. Absolutely bonkers take to say that there are 30 must start wide receivers. By definition, that is false unless every single person is playing in a 3-receiver league. If you're playing in a 2-receiver league with a flex, and as Rob said in his note there, running back is so good this year, there are not 30 must-start wide receivers. Look, I've had this discussion before. It's a difference of opinion. I don't think – I have a different threshold for players who are absolute must-starts. It's like in almost every scenario, I'm starting them. So, for example, David Montgomery would be like on the border of a must-start running back. He's running back 18. That means there are per game in full PPR. That means that I don't consider there to be 24 must-start running backs. Like, no way. I don't think Ramondre Stevenson is a must-start running back, you know? He might be top 24 on a weekly basis, but hey, if I picked up a streamer off waivers, I'm happy to play that guy over Ramondre if he has a better match. You know what I mean? So that's just the way I look at the term must-start. Like, you don't even think about it.
I was in part trolling you, but yeah,
it worked.
We do have somewhat of a difference of opinion on this.
Yeah, that's fine. If you want to make it a broader definition of must start, then yeah, Jauan Jennings
reminds me of the. You know what though? I will say this. I am happy with the direction this went because there are other directions this could have gone. And for those who don't know, it's a quick shout out reminder to last year's debate over what a breakout player is between a little heated there between Adam and Heath. For those who want to remember, the longtime fans of the podcast might remember this moment. I think I handled it a little bit better than maybe those two did, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think you definitely did. I would agree with that. All right.
I'll side with Adam.
Respect. I mean, the chat is siding with Adam. I think this was mostly me just trolling him.
Tough day for Dan. Yeah, I do think you are trolling mostly.
But wait till you read the email we have for Dan.
Get killed today, baby.
Just oh, sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Few other quick ones. Jaylen Warren's usage shot up this week, but I do think that was because Najee Harris got banged up in the fourth quarter. A lot of those carries came after that. I don't know if you guys covered that yesterday or not, but before the fourth quarter, it was 14 rush attempts for Harris and 7 for Warren. I think it's basically the same role that we've seen. But I do think Warren is healthier than he has been all year and looked good. And so I'm excited for him. I wanted to bring up my boy Drake Maye.
Yes.
He had another really high pressure rate and did not. Well, he took 1 sack, but I haven't watched it. I think it was probably a scramble attempt because it was a sack for 0 yards. So he had one of the highest pressure rates, 38%, and only that 1 sack. And also had a really low off target rate. I'm really excited to get into his game because that was a tough matchup. Montez Sweat did not play, right?
No,
he did.
But
he did play.
Oh, I thought he did.
I thought he was. You know, I didn't check, but I thought he was off the injury report, or at least let's check.
It was
Montez,
all I know from someone who was at the game. It was a wildly windy game there.
Montez Sweat played. He played.
Okay.
I don't know how much he played, but he
They almost had a Mahomes play too as he was rolling toward the sideline. A Mahomes Allen play, and he inches away from throwing a touchdown pass where the receiver just didn't get it in. I thought there were some really good snaps on his tape that I watch. I watch Maye after every week. He's one of the first players I watch because he's one of my favorite prospects in the NFL.
2 really random ones. J.K. Dobbins, I know it was a little bit scary to see Gus Edwards get so involved, but I actually am pretty okay with this if I have Dobbins. I don't want him to get hurt, and I don't like that they were just grinding it out of the middle with him so much more than he's ever had in his career. So I'm totally fine with those attempts going to Gus. And for what it's worth, Dobbins had the highest route participation rate and target share. They hardly threw it all. So, take those rates with a grain of salt. But still, like, if they get him more involved in the receiving game and less involved on up the middle touches, that's totally, totally fine with me. The other guy was Curtis Samuel, was a full-time player in Week 10 with Amari and Keon Coleman out. I don't know what's going on with Amari, and then Coleman, it sounded like it might be a multi-week thing. He didn't do much. Samuel didn't do much, but I just want to point out that 81% of his routes came as a perimeter receiver. And so I think that he can potentially do that role if need be and not be just a slot bound guy.
Some snap counts. Demario Douglas played only 42% of the snaps. The Patriots were in 3 wide receiver sets for a season low 42.6% of the snaps, and they were playing with a lead in a windy environment. So I don't really know what else to say about Demario Douglas. I just know that there are some managers out there who are struggling at wide receiver, and I do still think there's some weekly appeal to him because he's had 9 targets in like 4 of his last 6 games.
If I had to make a bet on a Patriots wide receiver from the film I've watched and the upgrade in kind of the snaps and targets and just kind of where I see this offense heading, it's Kayshon Boutte. That would be the receiver that I'm buying there with Drake Maye.
All right. Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell played 86% or more of the snaps without Michael Pittman. And TJ Hawkinson only played 46% of the snaps. That's 2 weeks in a row. He's been right around that number. We'll see if that increases.
They're just easing him back in.
Probably, yeah. Josh Oliver's been good. No Saints wide receiver played more than 55% of the snaps. That would be MVS and Mason Tipton. And Pittsburgh wide receiver Mike Williams played only 12% of the snaps and caught big touchdown. All right, if you think it's been rough on Dan, just wait till we read this email.
No, I don't even know what this is about. This one's going to be a nice surprise.
Oh, and Robert Thomas asked in the chat, Adam, how are you feeling now about dropping Caleb Williams? I think a lot of people owe me some apologies for the heat I took for that one. It was serendipitous, the best move I made. The dumbest move turned out to be the best move I made all year in fantasy. All right, we'll be right back after this on Fantasy Football Today.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
I feel like this is almost like the Bizarro episode of Seinfeld, the Bizarro crew, because like Adam, not only did he get really worked up after getting trolled, a light troll got really worked up, but then he gave himself a little pat on the back with his Caleb Williams take, his correct Caleb Williams takes. This really feels like he's pulling a me.
No, it was not a correct Caleb Williams take. It was a very like, I forgot to look at our Superflex score. Are you gonna beat me? Because I might lose both of my Jahmyr Chase leagues.
I looked at that, and that league I have such a good team, but I started so poorly due to injuries that like I can't fight back.
We're tied. We are left. Cooper Kupp for you, Tyreek Hill for me. I'm screwed.
Oh wow, I did make a huge comeback that I didn't even recognize last night. Who scored for me in last night's game, the Sunday game? What was I?
Amon-Ra St. Brown and
Amon-Ra.
I had Jared Goff.
The late Amon-Ra.
I might lose both of my Jahmyr Chase. What a pathetic week for me.
Oh, that was where you have Jahmyr Chase. I forgot. You might lose with Chase. That's unreal.
It is unreal. In both of my Chase leagues. Okay, anyway.
Oh, my God.
Let's get back to making Dan look bad because I can't take this anymore. Email from Joel and the Joro crew. I have historically been pretty split on whose side of the arguments I lean on between Adam and Dan. But the toothpick in the sandwich is one I heavily agree with Adam. Part of the point of a huge sloppy sandwich is getting to scoop up the remnants that fall after you finish. Great point, Joel. Great point. Anyway, this week was a big week for Dan's friend Rachel on Survivor. She got probably the best food item in the auction, got an idol. People love her game, but didn't get her out. But her biggest win was that she got a big burger in the auction, and the first thing she did was take out the toothpick. Is Dan reeling from this public denouncing of his position?
Wow. Well, first of all, I got to go back to the tape because I didn't even recognize that Rachel pulled the toothpick out of the burger, and in turn kind of mess with the integrity of the sandwich. But remember, she's on Survivor. She hasn't eaten for however many days. If I was in her position, I would pull that pick out too and just go to town on that thing. Like, you are hungry. You're going nuts on that burger. So it's not like you're worrying about sloppiness at that point, getting it all over the place. And I think one thing that people don't realize, it's not that I keep the stick in the burger because I don't want to pick up those sloppy remnants at the end or whatever the emailer said, which is an interesting point. It's because I want to have every bite be every topping on the burger. I don't want things falling apart, falling out, getting loose, getting my hands messy as well. I'm already a messy eater to begin with, as everyone could probably have predicted. But I will say this, I do like the shout out for Rachel, who was easily the player of the episode. But the one thing I would say that was missed in this email was her best play. She used the shot in the dark in a way no contestant has ever used it before, to gauge and read, like a poker player. She used it to read if the votes were going to come in against her, because she did have an idol, as was mentioned in the email, and she could have then used that idol. After the week, Jeff Probst named her the player of the week and talked about how that move might kind of change the way that shot in the dark is played. So really awesome episode. For weird coincidence too, I'm actually wearing my Team Rachel shirt today. I did not know this was going to be the email that we were going to read at all, as Adam can attest to. So just really exciting times for her. She's having such a great season. She's playing such a good game, and I'm really excited for her.
Adam is the one who said to pray for Dan Friday morning. I did say that because you played against Jahmyr Chase in 3 of our office leagues.
Oh yeah, I know I was playing. It's ridiculous. I'm gonna lose the other 2, but and my 2 home leagues I played against.
Oh God, crazy. Come on, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill apparently is going to try to play, but I guess they haven't ruled out surgery on his wrist, so not good. All right, and that brings us, speaking of not good, let's go to our 4 big topics. The Jets struggles. A lot of people want to know about the Jets struggles here. I don't know if anybody watched the last pass of the game that Aaron Rodgers threw, but he threw it behind Malachi Corley. I think he wanted Corley to stop his route. It would have been a touchdown, and then he threw a fit on the field afterwards. He was really unhappy.
Yeah.
Things are bad for the Jets. Jacob, is there any reason for optimism? And, before you answer, I just want everybody to think about one of our big topics last week was, why does Kyler Murray suck so bad, basically? Mm-hmm. We have the tendency to judge everyone after their worst game. Rodgers had scored like over 20 points, I think, in 3 of his previous 4 games, maybe something like that. So this is rock bottom for the Jets. But how do you feel about them right now, Jacob?
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Just digging into this week's game, there's not much encouraging to take away. I think really the schedule is all that you're banking on. But I wonder how much longer they're even going to be competitive. He wasn't pressured at a high rate, so I'm curious what happened with the passing game. I know Arizona, I guess maybe we should give some credit to Arizona's defense because they have taken away some things this year. And I highlighted them last week in a few different podcast spots in reference to Jaylen Waddle, because they just really take away perimeter receivers. So I was curious how this matchup would go. I was hoping we would see a ton of Breece Hall in this spot if they did take away Wilson and Adams, but it seems like Rodgers just kind of tried to force it to those guys and it didn't work.
Yeah, they've been really good, and every matchup going forward pretty much is better. The last time the Cardinals, I'm just reading on ArizonaCardinals.com or AZCardinals.com. The last time the Cardinals defense kept their opponents out of the end zone in 3 consecutive home games was 1926. So they're playing well. I watched the tape, not like the way Dan does. I didn't really break it down. Just want to kind of like a surface level look at it. I didn't really see a lot of open guys. I mean, I didn't see a lot of opportunities necessarily. Now, I talked about the Corley play. That could have been a touchdown, but that was garbage time in the final 5 minutes of the game. And then there was another play, 4th and goal, when he got strip sacked. Rodgers, Tyler Conklin did come wide open in the end zone. He was about to throw it to him, and the pressure had just gotten to Rodgers. Again, they lost their left tackle, who hasn't really been playing well. And what I'm noticing with Rodgers and with Cousins, I'd say, is that these guys who just can't move. I'm not talking about guys who don't run. I'm talking about guys who really can't move. It doesn't take much pressure to get them down, and the pocket has to be really good, and then they could be lethal. But if there's any pressure, they're in trouble. You're right. The pressure rate wasn't that high, but he still got sacked 3 times. So listen, I don't want to judge them based on their worst performance. Over the last 4 games since the Davante Adams trade, Adams is 4th among wide receivers in targets. Garrett Wilson is 7th. Adams is 2nd in red zone targets and 10th in end zone targets. Garrett Wilson is 9th in red zone targets and 10th in end zone targets. I think they're going to be okay. I don't think they're going to be great. I think they're going to be worth starting. I think I'd rather have both of them than Jauan Jennings. And I do like Jauan Jennings, but I would still take Wilson and Adams with them.
I mean, I can see that, especially Wilson maybe. But, I mean, I watched this tape and I don't know what you saw, Jacob, and I heard what Adam saw, but like the offensive design is just so stagnant with the Jets, and there's still communication issues in the offense. Rodgers, Adams, the offensive line play just isn't where it was supposed to be with their offseason additions. Even getting back Vera Tucker this week, there's just no deep connection with Wilson and no like what I expected between Wilson and Rodgers was going to be similar to the Adams-Rodgers connection. They've had enough time to work together. Some back shoulder stuff like that. We saw it early in the season a little bit, but no consistency there. So there's not much of the vertical threat in that. And Rodgers is still really quick to come to the check down when he's like, because he can work through a progression better than like most of these quarterbacks. So I still think Breece Hall is just going to have a lot of targets as we go forward in the season. He'll be a really good player for PPR leagues. But I don't know. This offense looks... There's like 4 or 5 of these like super stagnant offenses in the NFL, the Bears, the Jets, and just from a schematic standpoint, it's hard for me to see too much changing at this point of the season.
Yeah, it's funny. I said earlier in the year, maybe a few weeks ago, that there were several offenses that I just felt like things should be easier for them.
Yeah.
Because of their talent. And 2 of the teams that I mentioned, I know it looks dumb now, but at the time, I think there were some concerns. The Eagles and the Bengals. And those 2 teams, just like they were not meeting their expectations. And they have flipped the switch, especially the Eagles, I'd say, and things are better. Can the Jets do that? I don't see it at that level.
No.
But I think they'll be like a top 15 offense going forward.
Probably. That's probably fair. They have so much talent there.
Okay. So I do think that everyone needs to sort of just not judge teams at their lowest moment and just take a look at the overall production. In the last 4 games with Davante Adams, Rodgers has been solid for the most part. Adams has been okay. Garrett Wilson has been really good. I'm actually a little worried about Breece Hall because I still don't know who their goal line back is, but I think they had a 3rd and 1 or a 4th and 1 yesterday, and they gave it to Braylon Allen. And I think Braylon Allen's had like the only goal line carry in the last few weeks. And so I don't know.
Yeah. Part of this is just Aaron Rodgers. Like, he's just not the quarterback that he was at all, it seems like to me. There were signs of it in his last year in Green Bay. People just didn't want to kind of recognize them from a processing standpoint. He just doesn't see the field the same way he used to, in my opinion.
Yep. Sorry, last thing on this. 1 of 5 for 14 yards on pass attempts of 10 or more air yards in week 10. So that's horrible. But he had been better at that since the trade with Adams. Like there had been more downfield success because that had been a problem earlier in the season. They just had a horrible game. All right, next up, this is from Johnson Art or AJ Johnson Art. Is Brian Thomas Jr. done as a starter if Lawrence is out for the season? Jacobs, you've been so high on Brian Thomas Jr. Horrible game for him yesterday. 2 catches for 12 yards on 3 targets. They had the ball for 17 minutes and 41 seconds. I wonder if this is the most lopsided time of possession game of any. I'm serious, of any game this season. Do you think Brian Thomas is done being a starter if Trevor Lawrence is done?
Yeah, pretty much. The schedule is rough. He's not healthy. I watched all of his routes from week 9, and he's like avoiding contact at all costs. He's dealing with a chest injury, and physicality is a big part of his game. He's good enough that he can still just like finesse guys and get open. But when you throw that into consideration, plus Mac Jones, plus offensive line problems, plus the schedule, it's like, man, it's really a risky bet any given week that he might come down with some big plays. So yeah, he's like an extremely watered down version of Jameson Williams, where it's like you could start him because there's this potential for big plays. You know, he's a good player, but the framework is really, really unlikely to produce it, I think. I wanted to point out on the Jets, I did look it up. Over the past 2 weeks, Braylon Allen is the only running back with a carry inside of the 10-yard line. He only has a 12% snap rate inside of the 10-yard line, though. Breece Hall's been on the field for all of those plays, including the one that Braylon Allen got the touchdown on. They were in pony personnel with both backs in the backfield. Over the past month, it's 2-2 in terms of carries from inside the 10, and 80% snap rate for Breece, 20% for Braylon Allen.
So I actually took the time to watch this offense on tape, the Mac Jones Jaguars offense. And by God, not only is Brian Thomas somebody that you can't start, I think he's a must bench moving forward. There's just no faith that I'll have in this offense. They tried to do some condensed formation, some bunch looks early, give Mac Jones a lot of these first reads. But looking at the game holistically, they only had 1 attempt the entire game, the Jaguars, that went 20-plus air yards, and it was that final interception that he just heaved up to end the game. Everything else was 18 air yards or lower. As far as, Brian Thomas goes, the first target of the game for him came with 1:02 left in the 3rd quarter, and it was a miscommunication on an inbreaker. His first catch was a short hitch route for 5 yards. Late throw at the end of the progression from Mac Jones. A lot of first read stuff from Jones. Gabe Davis got more targets, more first reads. Ingram will probably benefit the most from what I've seen. But Brian Thomas, to me, is just someone you can't afford to start right now in this offense.
Some funny questions in the chat. Adam, what is the definition of a must bench? Yeah, Brian Thomas fits it, whatever it is. Adam, the type of guy to say, "Oh, mama," when the waitress serves him his turkey burger with no bun.
I can attest to that. I've gone out to dinner with Adam one time at this unbelievable diner that's like top 5 in diners. They have crazy Instagram. They had like something I've never seen on the menu, deep fried wraps, which I didn't try but want to try. A wrap in a deep fryer. I can imagine that's unbelievable. And Adam ordered like steamed broccoli, brown rice, and chicken for dinner from this place. Like, is that not accurate?
I ordered a chicken teriyaki bowl, which is
that came with steamed rice, steamed broccoli, brown rice. And
it came with white rice and broccoli. Yeah.
And you asked for no sauce on the chicken.
I did not.
I'm kidding.
By the way, I ordered that for dinner on Friday night. It's just incredible.
Sure, it's good, but I mean,
sit Brian Thomas. Kevin S says, who should be our trade deadline targets at each position? Personally, I have a few leagues with a week 10 deadline. All right, so. Well, then sorry, we missed that. But for people who have maybe a couple weeks left, who should be some guys that we're buying low on right now? Who should we trade for? It doesn't have to be buying low, but good rest of season value.
I'd buy high on must start every week league winner Jauan Jennings, honestly.
Same. That's top of my list.
Fine.
I think Debo's
at the end of the day, low. I'm sorry. At the end of the day, I don't think we disagree much on Jauan Jennings. Just of the semantics of it. Yeah. Debo Samuel, you said?
Yeah, I think he could be like a buy low. I think he has really high upside. We'll see what the role turns into, how it evolves. I think against Tampa Bay, it made a little more sense to like kind of attack down the field against those corners. But yeah, some big shootouts coming. I think we could see some huge Depot games.
I'm probably looking at like offenses that are clicking right now for as far as players I want to buy. I think somebody in the chat, shout out Brian Martinez, gave a good name, T. Higgins. Right now, you could probably get him pretty cheap. He's been injured a lot. If he can get healthy for a stretch, specifically the fantasy playoffs, he can probably win you your league. That offense is clicking. As far as other offenses that are clicking, I stand by the Jameson Williams. I'll buy on him. But if not, maybe you buy on Jahmyr Gibbs because of what we talked about earlier with his role kind of expanding a little bit in that offense early downs. And they're using him on interior runs as well there, which they hadn't at some points this season. So I like that for him as well.
Mike Evans, 3.15 yards per route run over the past 3 years with Chris Godwin off the field. That's second to only Tyreek Hill. I think when he comes back, that he's got a schedule that he could smash in. We'll see. It's a bunch of really bad teams. Like the Giants are one of them, where I don't know if Tampa Bay will need to throw a lot, but Tampa Bay just is going to throw a lot either way, I think.
Yeah, they have the Panthers twice, and I thought about that because they do have a bunch of teams that they could crush. But I would say Baker Mayfield is a really good buy low because his schedule is so good.
What do you think about Jaden Reed? I feel like Green Bay's offense could finally find some cohesion here coming out of the bye. And I think people have soured on Reed a little bit because he hasn't had huge fantasy games. So they've got a bunch of games that could be shootouts too.
I like that call.
He is one of the wide receivers that have in the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15, 16, 17, multiple matchups. He has 3 matchups, in fact, against bottom 10 defenses against wide receivers. Seattle's 25th, Saints are 23rd, Minnesota's 30th. So Jaden Reed has a great schedule. And then just before that, he has Detroit. Now, sorry, his next 3 games, Chicago, San Francisco, at Chicago, home against San Francisco. Again, I don't think Miami's that good, but that's 3 weeks from now. But at Chicago, home against San Francisco, those aren't necessarily great matchups, but it gets really good for Jaden Reed beginning in week 13, I'd say.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just laughing at Brian's comment. Adam gets the teriyaki sauce on the side so they don't ruin it by putting too much on.
I think people have a misconception about the way I eat. Right?
I do not think they have a misconception. As someone who's eaten with you multiple times, I do not think so.
How many times have you eaten with me?
The Giants tailgate that you claimed I ditched you at, but
what did I eat? I ate the steak.
No, you did. No, I think you took all the bread off of everything and like.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. You're one of those. You are one of those. You are a healthy eater. It's something to be proud of, dude. You're a healthy eater.
I had 2 peanut butter cups last. I've gone now.
The fact that you could go to that Mount Kisco diner and see a menu that looks like that and say, and I quote, this is a true quote, and I know you will agree with this, Adam, because I know you're not a liar. You said, "Wow, great order. I'm too scared to order that." Did you not say that?
Yeah, Dan. Like. I'm 40.
Scared of what?
I can't. You ordered a chicken parm sub with vodka sauce and
fried ravioli.
Ravioli in the sub. I can't.
Guess what? I was fine the next day. Nothing happened.
You don't know what it's like to have kids. I eat their leftover chicken nuggets and French fries and mac and cheese. It's sitting there on the table. You can't get like being a dad is a guaranteed 10-pound gain. You have to cut out.
You weigh 146 pounds and you've never gone over that.
I haven't weighed myself in at least a month because I'm scared of what the scale is going to say.
Scared of what?
It's going to be in the 150s, and that's just horrible for me. Horrible.
You just live life like this, where you're scared of a certain number as weight, and there's no point to it. Like, what do you need? What do you need to keep your weight down for at this point? Actually, you know what? You probably should, because that when we play next year in tennis, you got to get more than 2 games out of 12.
I will. Oh, believe me, I will. I'll get 12. Okay.
You will never beat me in that sport. No.
Other players with good schedules. I'm going to go over this on Wednesday's show, but just a few that I'll highlight. Calvin Ridley and Will Levis for what it's worth,
and Tajay Spears, if you can just throw him in.
I mean, Calvin Ridley, I can't imagine there's a wide receiver with a better schedule than Ridley unless it's Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors has a really good schedule coming up.
And both of them have quarterbacks who can't get them to the ball.
Well, I don't know if that's true anymore for Ridley, but Cortland Sutton is another guy. Cortland Sutton has a pretty good schedule.
You don't know if that's true for Ridley?
Well, he's had 3 big games in a row. One of them.
Levis was only in one of them.
Yeah. I mean, I have some concern. It's 16-yard ADOT. It's not super sustainable, but Minnesota, Houston, Washington, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Jacksonville coming up for Calvin Ridley. Jacoby Myers, it's not great in the immediate future, but he has a good schedule in the playoffs. George Pickens, yeah. The Dolphins wide receivers have a pretty good schedule. But I would say Ridley and Sutton are probably set up for pretty solid finishes.
Do we have any running backs? I would throw Isaiah Pacheco's name out there. Kareem Hunt, I feel like might be on his last legs.
I do have running backs, but Pacheco, like I would be so pumped about Pacheco, but then I feel like I'm overlooking the fact that he's coming off a broken leg.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and the fact that like they probably want to keep him, they work him in slowly for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kareem Hunt, if people think he's like doing a good job, then I think he's probably the most overrated running back in football. But if you get 20 carries a game, or in this case, get 6 catches, then you're going to be good every week. So he's not, to me, a big threat to Pacheco if Pacheco were himself. I do have some concerns about him being himself coming off a broken leg.
That's fair.
But he didn't have surgery or anything. It wasn't like Tony Pollard. It wasn't like, did he have surgery? He didn't have surgery, did he? Yeah, I feel like surgery would have been out for the year.
He did have surgery.
Did he? That's a pretty short recovery for surgery.
I'm not positive, but I thought he had surgery.
All right. Well, we should look into that.
Yeah.
James Conner has phenomenal playoff schedule. One guy who doesn't, or like one guy who kind of does on paper, but if you think about it, I don't know.
He did have surgery, by the way.
All right. Ramondre Stevenson. So he gets a couple teams that are poorly ranked against running backs. But if you think about Ramondre Stevenson after his week 14 bye, which is not great, Arizona, at Buffalo, and the Chargers in the fantasy playoffs. And the thing with him is like, he's very game script dependent. If they're falling behind, that's pretty bad for Stevenson. However, he is now more or less their third down back. So it could be okay. But I want Stevenson in a close competitive game at Arizona, at Buffalo, home against the Chargers. I don't love that playoff schedule for Ramondre Stevenson.
I will say those are all games where the running backs will likely get targeted just based on matchup. I don't know if it'll happen. Like Reese Stevenson only got 1 target this week, but like you said, the role is there. He's running more routes.
Yeah. All right, that's about all I got. And
I think you could buy high on Tyron Tracy, man. Especially like maybe people are a little panicky about the fumble or whatever. He's the offense, and the matchup set up really well for him. I put him at running back 12 rest of season, and people couldn't believe it. And I think that's kind of where we're at, is like people aren't quite ready to react to how high the potential really is for him. If I had Alvin Kamara, I would try to flip him for Tracy in a bunch and see if you could do that.
Okay, everybody, who is the stud wide receiver? The stud wide receiver, the real must-start wide receiver that Adam thinks that you should maybe think about. This is very, very strong advice. Maybe consider starting to think about selling high on. I'll tell you on Wednesday on Fantasy Football Today. But for now, let's finish off with Bon Me's topic. Never, ever draft a tight end before the 7th round. This year proves it. Does it prove it, Dan?
Yeah, of course it proves it. Look, as much as it's proven it, I still feel like I'll fall into this trap every year, because I do seemingly fall into this trap every year. I get excited about talent. I get excited about potential role, like I was with the tight ends this year. Dalton Kincaid, good example of that. Kyle Pitts, another example of that. I mean, I guess Trey McBride has somewhat worked out, but the problem with McBride is what I thought would be the problem with him. He doesn't score touchdowns and doesn't get looks in the red zone. So, I mean, he was wide open last week, so it's not on him. But point is, like, he's limited in some ways by the touchdown. So I don't know. I don't know when this will happen. I mean, NFL is moving in a direction schematically that it should happen. The teams are playing too high more than they ever have. The seam is probably an area they should go with the ball. But quarterbacks don't like to go up the seam with the football, because they can get their tight ends hurt and they can get their receivers hurt, and it requires timing, immaculate timing and velocity and ball placement that a lot of them don't really have confidence in themselves to throw. So I don't know. I don't know if it'll ever happen. I feel like next year I got to go back to my old strategy, which used to be the punt tight end. I was willing to do that for so long, Adam and Jacob, until Kelsey came along. And I convinced myself that it gives you such a weekly advantage that I want him in every league, and I would buy him in every auction. And now we're at the point where I just want to go back to what I used to do. Punt the position.
He's killing it now, though. I would be thrilled to have Kelsey.
Yeah,
for sure.
No,
Trey McBride's a monster. Kittle for sure.
He doesn't score, Trey McBride.
But I mean, that is annoying, but I did want to point out that that's an Arizona thing. The Cardinals are 31st in red zone pass attempts. That's
right.
Not
I knew that was part of what I didn't like about his profile, though.
Yeah, but it's not him. I mean, he has a 27% target share.
I'm not blaming him at all.
He's a big monster. Like, he could definitely be scoring touchdowns.
So I don't think this year has proven anything about tight end. This is a pretty normal year for tight ends. Here are, over the last 5 years, the amount of tight ends who have averaged 12 or more PPR fantasy points per game. 4, 6, 4, 7, 4. So we're on the low end, but it's not a great year for tight ends. But your top 12 tight ends right now are Kittle, Bowers, Kelsey, Otten, McBride, Pitts, Kraft, Mark Andrews, Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki, Dalton Kincaid, Zach Ertz. But the top five are Kittle, Bowers, Kelsey, Otten, McBride. So
and then comes Kraft. I mean, 2 of those guys you could get off the waiver wire.
Then Pitts and Kraft. But like Pitts and Kraft, like Kraft hasn't really been that good, right? So
neither has Pitts.
No. So if we're just looking about the top 5 guys,
no one is. I think that's the point, though. It's like, why are we investing in a position where there's not much of a weekly advantage and they're not scoring average?
I would say that there is a pretty big weekly advantage if you have Kittle, Bowers, or Kelsey.
No, because they're just barely eclipsing this 12-point whatever
Oh,
mark.
I didn't say that. That's not true. George Kittle's at 17.4 fantasy points per game in PPR. George Kittle.
Yeah, with Brandon Ayuk injured.
All right, yeah. I mean, obviously.
And then Kelsey, it's with Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown injured. So a lot of these are circumstantial.
Kate Otten.
Yeah. Kate Otten only because of the injuries. A lot of these are circumstantial.
So, this year has solidified to me more than ever. And I hammered this home. I hope I hammered this home to people.
Okay.
My tight end strategy is very, very different in a 2 wide receiver league versus a 3 wide receiver league. I absolutely want to invest in it in a 2 receiver league, and it is not much of a priority for me in a 3 receiver league. Now, I did want to get a top 8 tight end. I said that over and over again. But that was more like the round 6, 7, even 8, 9 guy, because I would be waiting for Jake Ferguson. But it is so much more important. Right now, the trouble we're having filling out our 3 receiver league lineups.
Yeah, I think if you're going to go results driven with your takeaways on this year, there's the only takeaway is like just draft running backs with 5 years first 6 picks, because that's just how the year has played out. Like I don't know if there's much to take away from it.
I agree with that.
But like it's always going to be a little bit difficult to find a good, consistent 3rd receiver and then a flex in a PPR league. So I would invest more in that on draft day if I were in a 3 receiver league. But you should try to have a good tight end. You should always have a good tight end. But you can get by streaming. But I think that like in a 2 receiver league, I do think it's super important to have a good tight end. It's just, you guys probably don't play in 2 receiver leagues. I play in a couple, and tight end is much more valuable. But I don't really agree with the take of never drafting a tight end before the 7th round. That's pretty late, All right. That's it for today's show. Listen, happy Veterans Day, everybody. And thank you all for those of you who have served. Thank you all for serving. Rob Thomas is in our chat right now. He's our Facebook moderator. He does a lot on social. So he's a veteran. I want to thank him and everybody for everything you've given us. You're freaking awesome. And we can't thank you enough. I hope you had a great, I hope you enjoyed Beyond the Box Score today. And we are hashing out the definitions of must start and must bench and all that. I mean, I don't even know how George Kittle could be good anymore with Jauan Jennings in must start status. But, wait, did I say the stat on George Kittle that he is? I don't think I did. He has the 2nd biggest gap. Everything held as it is today, the gap between Kittle and Bowers is the 2nd biggest gap per game in 19 seasons.
Wow.
Between tight end 1 and tight end 2.
Okay. And I thought last year there was no gap. Sorry.
No,
that is crazy though, because you thought Kelsey was giving you that weekly advantage in all those other Kelsey years, but apparently that wasn't the case.
He was pretty close.
Okay.
He's having the best non-Travis Kelsey season since Jordan Reed in 2015. But
he's
barely over some other guys, but that's how good Kittle's been.
He has 7 touchdowns in 8 games.
Yeah. So it's a
7 touchdowns would rank 2nd at tight end last year over the course of the full season.
I have Kittle. Coincidentally, I'm 9-1, says Griffin. Okay, that is it.
On the San Francisco note, like we're like, how can Kittle still be this good with the other guys if they're that good? I think they'll lead the NFL in points from this point on. Like Purdy's playing amazing. We finally have CMC back. Like
Adam
the schedule sets up really well.
Offense hater.
I love them. I'm going to put them second. I'm going to put them second behind the Ravens.
I just think they're going to be in shootouts like almost every single game. Maybe not. Maybe the defense is good enough that they won't be, but I think they're going to see a lot of big point totals.
All right, it's a bet. It is a bet. What does the loser have to do?
That's easy. That's easy money. Ravens play the Steelers twice. They play the Eagles. They play the Chargers. They play the Texans.
For 30 against all of them, man. Their defense.
Let's do it.
All right.
What are you guys betting? I'm the arbiter of this bet.
I don't know. Loser has to do an impression of the other person.
No, that's too easy. That's way too easy.
That's too easy for the guy who never does the Jacob Gibbs impression. He always says he's going to do it.
I did it once and it wasn't great. I worked on it because I thought you weren't going to be on today's show. I will bring it out next week.
I don't have thick enough skin to hear someone do an impression of me. I'm just telling you that right now. I could not deal with that. All right, we'll figure it out, but it's a bet. 49ers versus Ravens, rest of season, points per game in case they're I think they're
Baltimore.
Offensive points per game, not including defensive scores.
Offensive points per game. For Dan, for Jacob, I'm Adam, for Schaefer too. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today.